moment that we made it FM. Empty shelves are happy shelves.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
If you're in there dusting off the shelves, then you're a happy renter.
Exactly. All good?
So,
Good. Okay.
so Emmy.
So, Emmy,
So
talking about ABC News, Nightline Special, Ted Koppel, Stanford University. Director comes over and says, I want you to build a platform right over there. And I need it built right away. So I immediately go to you and I say, I need you to build a platform right over here as quick as you can. And you do it. And then the director comes over later and says, yeah, you know what, I don't think I'm going to use that platform. I don't think we're going to need it. I'm going to need it in the shot. It's that kind of stuff.
well, that's what makes this business so great,
It's that,
is being able to do it and having people around you that can be between you and the director, first of all. Secondly, that understand it's going to take more than a split second. But thirdly, you have confidence enough to know that you're going to get it done one way or another to what they need. And that's something that I have great joy at my retired age of helping other people understand. I mean, my crews around here are probably as versed as any crews there are in the city, just because they do everything. They're out here sweeping the floor. They're driving truck, they're loading truck, they're unloading truck.
or they're being educated by somebody that's got an enormous amount of experience.
40 years.
So tell us who you are
Okay.
and tell us what you do.
I don't know what I do. You got to look at the business card I just gave you. My name's DougElliott. I'm retired. I got my first Social Security check last Saturday, and I retired from a 80 to 120 hour a week job to a 40 hour a week job, and it's really great.
What do you do? Tell us what you do.
I'm the operations supervisor for the company, which handles all the rental equipment, all the trucking, and making sure that the right thing is on the right truck at the right place at the right time. And then when it comes back, it gets put away in a condition and manner that we can find it again. Because this is a pretty big warehouse, and we, as some people know, have staging platforms that are 4 foot by 8 foot, and we have 600 of them. And there's been many times that we've been able to sweep the floor where they belong, because they're all out.
How big is the building we're in right now?
85 feet tall, football field and a half long, and a football field wide.
And it's packed full of scenery.
And it's full of scenery, lights, draperies, offices, and a good shop.
Okay,
A welding shop and a paint shop.
take us back to the glory days. When you first started, what were you doing? Where were you?
I started in June of '68, and I went to work for ACT at their little warehouse down on Napoleon Street in San Francisco. And we were making $2.85 an hour, and we were happy campers because we had lots of money.
Steady income.
And I started building, and because I could build and read prints, I've never looked back.
So building scenery.
It's been the best mistake I ever made in my life, because I have no experience in the theater when I started. Some people tell you I still don't, but that's okay. But because I could build and read blueprints, I had a niche that needed to be filled.
Let's hold on 1 second.
Sure.
Okay, let me open up, check my focus, no default, and we're on.
Okay. So then from there, humble beginning, a one-day job. I've taken a few of those. I went to the opera. I spent 5 years at the San Francisco Opera, both at the scene shop and in the opera house itself. And then I started working film, and my first film was Bullet,
Steve McQueen.
and then Petulia. And from there I did 3 Dirty Harrys that were done here in San Francisco. And then I got on Streets of San Francisco, and I was the only San Francisco local person that did every episode for all 5 years. So it's been a pretty cool run. And then I took a phone call and was offered to look at a trailer full of equipment and tell Mr. Mendenhall if it would fit in the Fairmont. He said, I'll pay you 4 hours to come down here and look at this and tell me if it's going to fit in there. I'm looking in the back of a 40-foot trailer that's crammed full of scenery. Oh yeah, I can tell this. I said, well, I can get it in there. So 10 years later, when the company closed, I left there. And then I started here 5 years ago. And one of the best things about this is the parking, which is excellent. You can park anywhere around the whole building. And for lunch, if it's not raining, you can go out and sit on the rocks by the lagoon and just be totally away from your work. And
where are we right now? We're on
Treasure Island, which is the middle of the bay and belongs to San Francisco, not Oakland, as they wish. But
tell me your favorite part of what you do, or what you did and what you're doing.
Well, people ask me if I miss being on the road. I don't miss one thing about it, but I loved it when I was doing it. And I love the challenge. And as I said before, being able to teach or install or show other people how to get by in this business and in the world, in fact. And sometimes it's not really tough. It's just looking at it from a different perspective, which my guys all say I do, because I've done most of the things that they're up against once or twice before. And there's not too many things I haven't tried in this business or been involved with. And it's just the learning process from them. Okay, why is he doing it that way when I would do it this way? And that's my biggest joy at this point. Before, it was being able to run crews of 250 people without thinking about it. We did Liberty Weekend. When they rededicated the Statue of Liberty, I had a crew of 250 guys. And the second Friday we were there in New Jersey, the project manager made the mistake of coming out at lunchtime and giving everybody their checks, and out of 250 guys, I got 22 back Friday afternoon. And I think we learned a lesson there. We didn't do that again. But it's been a joy. Every day's a new day. You never do the same thing twice. I don't care if it's for the same company and it's the same show. It's not the same. It's a live stage show every day.
Tell me about being on the road. Tell me about, I don't know, I call it reality happens, because at a certain point, all the planning and all the talk and all the design comes down to load in with a certain amount of time to be ready for the show. Reality happens.
That's the biggest challenge, and that's the most fun of it, to see if you can get it done in the time that they've specified. And sometimes you can't. And sometimes you're there all night and you're bleary-eyed and still trying to drink coffee when the audience walks in. But that happens. And there's other times when you're done at 5 o'clock the night before and you go to the bar and have a beer, go swimming in the hotel swimming pool, go have a nice dinner and go to bed. But those aren't too often.
What's it like when you're on the road and you're working together with a group of people for a short amount of time?
Mm-hmm.
And you get so close and so tight, and then loadout day comes and you're gone.
What's that like?
What
do you remember any of them? Vaguely, some of them. And unfortunately, as is human nature, you remember the ones that didn't quite fit in better than you remember the ones that were on the same page you were on all day. But it's still being able, and in this business, to have other people go through a town and come back and said, so-and-so says hello, and you're scratching your head trying to remember who so-and-so was and which time you were through that town you worked with them. But it's still a camaraderie that is in probably no other business, is being on the road with theater or with industrial shows or with trade shows. And bigger is better, only because they give you a little more latitude of what you have time to do. Your small shows get down so tight that you go to, a perfect example is if a show starts here in San Francisco and does their first run through and their first stop is San Francisco. I've had TDs and trucking guys and everybody else tell me we have to add 2 trucks and 12 hours to the in and out because we'll never make it. We can't put down the hours that it takes us here in San Francisco to do the job because we won't make it in Tulsa or Cincinnati or about anywhere but Toronto and New York. And it's just, and having guys, you know, you call a crew here, they all have tools. You call a crew in Des Moines, Iowa, and one of them might have a bent screwdriver and a pocket knife, but that'll be about the extent of your tools. So you kind of need to figure on that when you're, after you've been out. First time you're out, you haven't got a clue.
What was your first time out like? Do you remember?
Yeah, my first time out
was
was...
real deal, where you're the go-to guy.
First time out, we were in Macon, Georgia with Jethro Tull. And I said, well, after lunch, we'll hang the blacks. And half my crew cheered and the other half ran. And being a good California boy, I didn't know what I'd said. So it was an experience. It was trying to learn real quick how to get along in other parts of the nation.
Well, I guess it's that, and it's also trying to direct a bunch of people that you don't know.
And that don't know who I am, what I'm trying to do, or may not even know what we're doing. Because I remember we did a show, in fact, you and I did it in Atlanta, LA Gear, and when we went to load out, I remember, or even the load in, I remember our head trucking person, very nice blonde lady, going into the men's bathroom and kicking stalls and telling them to get out of the stalls because they still had 2 hours on their shift. And they would pay them cash at the end of their shift, and you get 8 new guys for the next 4 hours because they go out and buy beer, whatever they were on. And you'd look out the loading dock, and there was a big culvert that went under the railroad tracks, and there were people lined up in that culvert with a security guard. And you go to the security and say, okay, I need 8 more people. And they'd send the next 8 in line. These guys had no clue about unloading a truck or being safe or anything else. But you can get it done. You may work all night because it was a little slower load-in than you expected, but that's part of the fun too. Being able to work 24, 48, 72 hours straight.
A lot of people can't do that. I mean, I don't know too many people in too many businesses that...
For both of us.
We're good.
This is a second shot for both of us. We ain't going back.
Take 2.
Yeah, no, there ain't no take 2s. But it's the joy of being able to pull things like that off. The satisfaction of, okay, I went in, my crew wasn't exactly what I would have wanted, or our lead truck, as we found out in Las Vegas, broke down at the border and had every bit of starting equipment for both carpentry and electrics on it. And instead of sending another tractor out to get the trailer, they towed the whole 80-foot rig in to Las Vegas from the border. And so we were 11 hours late, I think, getting started, but nobody could do anything. That was where I wore the crew out with carrying 1 1/8 plywood. About after 4 hours of it, I looked at the steward and I said, you got to get me a new crew. And he says, well, what do you mean? I said, I've worn this one out. And he looked up in the seats, and they're all just up in the seats laying down. They couldn't carry any more plywood. I was still carrying it, but they weren't.
So film, television, rock and roll, industrials.
I used to run front light at Winterland for Bill Graham.
How was that?
Great, except I'm allergic to grass. So when you're up in the ceiling of Winterland, it's... So I was riding bike at the time, and I used to take my dark glasses off and just get somebody to help me get going in a straight line, and the wind would blow my eyes open so I could see to ride home. This was safe, though. In 1968 and 69, that was very safe. That was perfectly acceptable.
That's excellent.
We have a good time with it.
So when people ask you, and I've asked this question to a couple of other people in your family or friends, when they ask you, what do you do? How do you think they ever understand?
No. And if you're lucky enough, and I've said this many times, to meet somebody that you marry that somewhat understands it, and somewhat understands that maybe Valentine's Day you're not going to have dinner with them because you're in New York suddenly or somewhere else, you're a very lucky person.
How do you explain
The divorce rate in this business is the highest of any business, any group of businesses there is.
And that's because you're on the road, or
Well,
you're
and
working
that your partner
18,
doesn't
20-hour
understand the
days,
business.
or they don't understand.
And
How do you-
even when they do understand it, they don't.
the reality happens at a certain
Right.
point.
I don't care if your wife, husband is a stage manager for the opera or whatever. They don't understand your side of it because they're only working one show and you're working 12 or whatever. It's even people that are both in the same business, very seldom, they have to work at it to not
That's
be
tough.
at each other's throats.
Yeah, it's very tough.
I have a pair here that weld. They both work in the shop. They're both excellent welders. They don't work together for that reason because they're both charge people and they cannot work with each other. So it's a tough business for
Well,
family.
It's, let's get back to, how do you explain to people what, I mean,
How do you tell them what you do? It's very hard. How do you explain to somebody, upstage is back and downstage is forward and stage right and left aren't what they think it is, and a strike really doesn't hurt anybody and all of these things. How do you explain that to somebody that has no clue?
Up is out, down is the...
Yeah, that has no clue about the business.
Right.
How do you explain that you came home and you're soaking wet and it's not raining out because the rain effect went wrong and you happen to be in the wrong spot? It's just really tough. It's, what bar were you in and fell in the toilet? But if you can find somebody or not, to me, it's the greatest life going. I would have never, when I got out of the service, I never had any thought of doing this. I'd never been in theater before. I had no desire to be in theater. I had nothing about it.
How did you get into it? What happened?
My aunt was the photographer and publicist at the opera, and they needed somebody to grommet, to put grommets in drops. They were doing all new legs and borders at the opera that summer, and I started and spent almost 3 weeks at the Armory in San Francisco, riding around on a four-wheel furniture dolly with a pad on it, putting in grommets and ties for all the borders and drops for the opera. And that's how I got started.
Were you hooked? I mean, were you
No, it was a job.
just a kid?
I have never been, quote, hooked on theater. I like it for a while. But if you do the same show 6 weeks in a row, it gets really old. I did Beatlemania. And the second time they came to San Francisco, the flyman crawled up on the fly floor, took one look and says, "Oh, hi, Doug, I'll see you in 3 weeks." Never saw him again.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's what you make of it. You can either you can help people or you can just be there. It just depends on if you want to use your head or just be neck down, because there's a lot of people in this business that are neck down. They show up when you tell them to, they do what you tell them to, they leave when you tell them to. And if you tell them tomorrow to do the same thing they did today, 90% of them don't have a clue.
At what point did you realize, wow, this is great, I'm really a lucky person to be doing this?
About 2 years into it, when I started
Was it
seeing.
a moment? Was it a show?
No, it was just realizing that I was making decent money. The future looked pretty good for something I had no clue about, and that it seemed to be something that wasn't going to fold, wasn't going to go broke the next day or anything else. Film I really liked for that reason too, but every day is different.
Well, I was going to ask you, between television, film, rock and roll, industrials, do you have a favorite?
No.
They're all different.
They're all different. They're all different parts of your life. You graduate from one to the other, basically, by just working for a group that is a call situation. They provide labor. They're not your employer. You belong to a union. You have union brothers. You have some backing that way. You have good insurance. you have retirement. But just figuring that this is better than anything else I can think of that I would do. And now I wouldn't know what I would have done had I not done this. But when I started, I had no clue that it was going to last longer than 3 weeks. I mean, there's no way in the world that, unless you're a theater person to start with when you get in, you have a clue that this is going to go anywhere.
Well, did you have any idea that it was going to take
No.
paths that it takes either?
No, because I was in the shop, very fortunate to be in the shop because the shop works more than the theaters do. And finding out that, the shop did that you could always fall back on the shop. You could always fall back on your building skills or your technical skills that way. Whereas in the theater, when the show was over, you were out of work. But to see all the zigs and zags that a 40-year career could take, not a chance. I mean, I've been pretty much all over the United States. I've been to Hawaii, I've been to the Caribbean, I've been to Japan, I've been to Australia, all with this business. I've never been to Europe, only by choice. I had no desire to go to Europe, so I haven't.
What was it like working in Japan?
Scary. We did a show and we had these huge parts that had to come out of these containers. The only way to get to Japan is either by plane or ship. And so I asked them if they had a forklift. Hi. So I said, okay, we got to get this out of the container. And so they got it started by just crawling up beside it and putting 20 guys behind it and pushing and starting to slide it out. And then they just kept adding people with their shoulders under it, and they were literally carrying this thing out of the container. They just slid it out the back and they'd add another person. Every time there was room for another person to slide in and get their hands on it, they were there. And that's why we unloaded our whole show. And in those days, of course, Japan was not quite where they are now technically either. I mean, they were, but they weren't showing it to Westerners, is my feeling. And I was there with Martha Graham Dance Company. And I remember our electrician telling me, you come with me because I have to hook up and I have 3 copper plates back there that I have to bolt wires to. And he says there's about a ½ inch in between them, and I'm afraid I'm going to get stuck to one of them. So it's everywhere you go is different. And then you start dealing with customs and things like that, even going to Canada. It's a totally different world than anybody thinks of. You drive across the border, you show them your passport, whatever. They don't a show, they care about what you're bringing into their country. But the Caribbean is almost the opposite. You take everything in for free. You pay to get any raw materials back out. So you make the Caribbean your last stop on your tour and you leave your set there. And they build houses out of it.
What's the...
Okay, and we're on.
Okay.
So, it's just the most wonderful business I can think of. I've met wonderful people. I've met people that aren't so wonderful. But for the most part, I've met wonderful people. And I think that exudes from my attitude about it. Because you can make anything you want out of a meeting. And whether the people are happy to see you 3 years from now and you haven't seen them in between, or walk in the shop and walk right past you because they don't recognize you because they don't want to. It's what you make of it.
Yeah, that was always my favorite part of it, is working closely with somebody and then not seeing them for a long time.
Yeah, and hearing a name, all of a sudden, wow, I remember them.
Right.
Wonder what they're doing now.
Right.
And that in this business can be anything.
Yeah.
Because there's really only 400 people in this world. We all just change faces and places,
It's true.
It's just the way it is.
I love sitting around at coffee break or during dinner, on show, talking with other people and the stories that come up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, stagehands have to be the greatest storytellers there are, but 90% of them are dead true. I mean, strange things happen. We have a passion for taking something simple and making it a little difficult at times. If the show's going too well and too easy, we'll find a way to make it difficult. And it'll never, some people especially the audience, but even some people that are connected to the show in the management side may never realize it, that we've just taken a really simple move and made it really hard just because we're bored. And we can do it.
What's when something goes wrong during a show, during a live show, whether it's a concert or a live television show, or you want to shoot for a film and something that was supposed to happen didn't happen, what mode do you go into?
I'd say never panic. I would say that you go into a mode of immediately thinking all the things that could have caused it not to happen. At the whole time you're walking toward even a live show, even a meeting with a speaker, you're moving toward what the problem is. And I remember one time doing the Nutcracker here in San Francisco on the living Christmas tree. And it was starting up and it fouled. And it was going to take two sections at once. And two of us ran from the wings and dove behind the tree and shook it loose and then just lay there behind the tree till it grew. And people from the front said even though they knew there was something wrong, they never saw us move because we just dove out and I literally ran and jumped onto the stage. And you just do that. And if something doesn't work or a light doesn't work or something, if you have spotlights, it's always, you can quickly call and have somebody else cover it. Or, a performer falls off the stage for some reason or another, you don't follow them down with a spotlight. It's things you learn that can cover these mistakes. And seldom do you have things that can't be solved. I mean, occasionally an electric motor or winch will mess up and keep running and drag one thing into another and cause a big loud crunching noise, which probably isn't part of the show, but it was that night. And maybe that scene doesn't go on and the actors or actresses have to work around it too. It's never just one part of the show. If something goes wrong, it affects the whole show. And
do you think the audience has a clue about people behind the scenes, the crew?
No, 90% of them don't.
Do you think the audience comes in to the show or the concert and has no idea that there's a group of people behind the scenes that are doing things to make the show work?
I think less with concerts. I think more with theater shows that the people are more aware, simply because most of them have had the advantage of doing tours through theaters if they wanted them, or the opera, while the crew is working. If you go to a concert and see those 85-foot towers with scrims on them and lights all up and so on, people don't think that somebody actually went up there and hung all those lights or hung those scrims or had to build the scaffold. Start there when it's still unsecure. It's not all bolted together yet. And you're up 80 feet in the air and a little breeze comes up, it'll move you 6-8 feet. You just either do it or you don't. And the worst part of it is that many times people that are afraid of heights get into situations where they are up there and they freeze and then you have to go get them. That's the worst. It's just like a drowning person. You don't know what they're going to do. If you have to go 85 feet in the air or whatever and get somebody, you don't know what they're going to do. And that's the scariest part of it.
There's a term that I have heard called the magic. We're making the magic, or it's all part of the magic that helps create the whole show.
What is the magic? The magic is mirrors and smoke.
Is magic us?
We are magic. We as stagehands, as project managers, as producers, are magic to other people. And you'll have, we've done so many smoke shows and fog and everything else, but we've also done some pretty stupid things with especially dry ice fog, where we have people under a stage working that the dry ice fog's on top of and it goes down under the stage. Dry ice depletes oxygen. And it doesn't take you very long to realize you can't breathe anymore. And I did a show with a scuba mask on and a tank, because it was the only way we could do the move with all the dry ice fog coming down through the hole in the stage. And that was the solution. I said, we either have these masks, you get us the masks, you get us tanks, or we're not doing that. And within an hour, we had tanks and masks.
Well, make it safe.
Well, you have to have a certain amount of safety. I mean, we're probably the most unsafe business there is, simply because of what we do, that we're perfectly willing to walk on things that aren't finished, or climb ladders that aren't tied off at the top because you're the first one up the ladder. Well, who's going to tie it ahead of you? She isn't. Mom takes care of us, but, you know, somebody's got to go up there and tie the ladder off.
We were talking about technology before. How's technology changed what you do in this business?
Well, where I am now, it's the computer, which I barely know how to use, but it helps me with communication and keeping track of what's going on. But I think technology itself has changed so many things that electrically or electronically, you have lights that move by themselves, whereas before you would have had to have somebody up on a bridge to move that light to follow the singer or whatever. And any of the new rock shows and so on have all the moving lights, and they do all kinds of patterns with them. They can put different patterns in them, they can change color, and it's all electronic. And it's getting smaller and smaller. They have projectors that can move now. And it's technology is part of life. You can't do without it.
What do you...
And it won't go backwards.
No, that's true.
It's not going back in that little hole down in Cupertino in that garage. It ain't gonna go there.
What, and I was, as a wrap up.
Okay.
All right, so Sarah just brought up a great question.
Yeah.
What about technology? Where do you think it's going to go? What do you think is going to happen?
I don't think it'll ever replace us. It will cut down probably on the numbers of people it takes to produce certain shows or to put a show on, but I don't think they can ever get it where it's totally automatic, because I don't know if anybody's been watching, I think it's the Discovery Channel has World Without Humans, and how long it takes for an asphalt road to be again a meadow with trees growing in it. 1 year. We're pretty fragile.
Yeah, true.
But in our business, people aren't going to go away. Machines can't build what we build, because what we build isn't always what it started out to be. Machines don't load trucks with our equipment on them, and machines don't run shows because of problems. Because if you've got all machines running it and something goes wrong, whether it's a mouse running across a sensor or what it is, there's nobody to stop it.
What's the one thing, you say that you're retired now, and I find that hard to believe because I don't think you're ever going to retire really. What's the one part of the business that you'll miss the most?
If I ever retire?
If you ever retire.
I don't know. I mean, when I was going to retire earlier, and I was really set on retiring, getting completely away from it. I had all kinds of plans what I was going to do. I was going to have a great garden. I was going to have 2 houses that were completely fixed up and all of this. But they're still sitting there. I still have a garden. I still have 2 houses. And things are wrong with both of them, but they're livable. But the thing I think I'll miss most is the camaraderie of the people I work with and for. And some people I only work with once in my life. And some people we work together many times over the years. And it doesn't have to be somebody that's with the same company you are. It's somebody you've met somewhere, and they show up in, as I said, 400 people. They show up in a different space, different place, different face, but they're still the person you met. And first meetings are pretty telling in this business. And if anybody's in the business that doesn't think so, they're not paying attention.
It's a pretty tight-knit group of people, that's for sure.
Well, when I started, there were 100 members in the local here in San Francisco. And you knew who had died or passed away or had retired to give you a chance to hold one of their cards. Now there's 2,700, but you still know a lot of them. I don't know all of them by any manner or means, but the best part about it, they don't know me either. And that can go both ways.
Is there anything about this business that we haven't talked about that you'd like to share?
I don't think so.
I think we've covered all of
we
it,
did a
haven't
pretty good cross section.
How about, have you a wild story, just something that sticks out?
Not that I would tell.
I think you'd put on too. We could. What do you want?
Really sad story. Can I tell us a sad story?
We've,
Well, I mean, you know, I asked as many things as I wanted to. Is there anything that you guys can think of that we? Is there a story that we could chop up?
No,
They're
they're not
too-
for film.
Yeah,
They're not for film.
That's the tough part about all the. good
It's
films.
we're still rolling.
Yeah.
Okay, then I won't say it.
Well, we should.
But
we can stop and get. Thank you.
Well,
Or is there something
I was
else?
going to just ask a question. You started out in the mid-'60s in the business. You know,
late
how-
60s.
in the
Late 60s.
How have
I
you-
spent the mid 60s in the Far East.
Somewhere else.
I mean, how has it all gone? I mean, is there a difference between the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s?
I think only in the technology that we as humans have gained, not so much the machines, about different products and so on. I mean, like right now we're building a set here out of plywood. It's bamboo plywood. It's probably the worst thing to ever thought of making a set out of. It's a living thing. It's not a man-made, it's not even like plywood because it splinters so easily, and if you sand it wrong, you've ruined the whole, whatever you're building. You got to start over. And it's sometimes our technology gets the best of us. But I think as a whole, between the 60s and now, the biggest difference I actually see is the abuse that we do to our bodies, which I've never been part of. But I can see it in people I work with. There's not as much alcohol, there's not as much drugs at this point in our business. I'm not saying they're not out there, but in this business it doesn't work because you can't pass out in the middle of a load in or a load out or the middle of your show or whatever. And it's just something I've never understood. My drug of choice is red, white, and blue can. Has Clydesdales on it. I've been at that since I was 3 years old. And I still drink Budweiser. 6-pack a day just to keep my weight up. So it hasn't changed much.
This is where we put the Budweiser logo.
Yeah.
Underneath. Anything else? Anybody else can think